And good morning,
And
Patriots.
there it is.
I'm here.
Sorry, I
Hello.
forgot, I forgot to put the little video clip. But hey, we're in. It's all good.
Boom. Lucas is in. I'm
Hey, Lucas.
gonna have to mute. I'm gonna have to mute myself every now and then because I'm clearing my throat left and right.
Really?
It's probably all that facial hair growing. It's causing you to have some throat issues. It's just so much hair.
Well, and the
It's
tension
yes.
from the ponytail pulling back on
That's it.
that.
Yeah, that's it.
That is, you got a new look every week, Michael. No hat.
I try to mix it up.
Now you're
Here, I'll do
accenting
something
your
new.
receding hairline. It's good to see someone else's.
There,
You do
here, I'll
that?
do
Did you do
something
that
new.
just for me?
Yes,
Did you
I
do that
did.
for me?
Just a
Oh,
strand.
thank you. I don't care what they say. You're a good guy, Michael. Okay.
Oh, who are they?
Oh,
Lies, I tell you, lies. Good morning, gentlemen. Good to see you both.
Good morning. Well, happy late Father's Day to the both of you.
Thank you.
And
sir.
to you.
And to you. Happy Father's Day.
Someday.
Wait.
Do you have kids?
Do you have children? No, you don't. Ben.
No, I
Are you
don't.
no.
Oh, I was about to say.
Well, happy
Eventually,
Sunday.
happy Father's Day.
No, I don't think so.
This is
No,
not one of those shows. This is where, okay, we got you. No.
Yeah.
My first and only wife. We are not blessed with kids yet, but to be honest with you, we can't afford them yet. That's not really in the cards right now.
Someday.
Well, you're never able to afford them. They just get
True,
more
but you can
expensive.
at least have a start.
You find a way. You find a way.
Yeah. All right, guys. So yeah, today's topic is on masculinity. Now, that word is a very, very divisive, dangerous word in the world of the Marxist leftist sphere.
Mm-hmm.
But because this is a belated Father's Day episode, I figured we could cover the importance of masculinity in the home and the biblical connection to the importance of masculinity. So before we
I'm
dive
actually
too deep,
surprised. I'm actually surprised the word masculine made it past the censors.
right?
That's true.
There might be some little comment saying this might be offensive.
Right? Flagged for offensive, abusive content. You're causing harm to others by inflicting masculinity upon them. Sorry,
I'm triggered. I don't know about you guys. I'm totally triggered.
So yeah, before we dive too deep into it, from y'all's experience, like how has that word masculinity evolved from back in your time to now? Has it gotten better? Has it gotten worse? Like, has society viewed it better or worse from when you were younger?
Who goes first? The oldest guy?
Yeah, since you go further back.
Are we going further back? Further back in the evolution of that word? No, it's completely different. In so many different ways. When I was a kid, like to the kids in the neighborhood, I'm lucky if I'm Mr. Joel. Most time I would never call. In my day, if I were a 10-year-old boy and I called the next door neighbor Bob, I'd get slapped back home. I'd come home rolling into the front door. And it's funny, the view you had of men back there as a young boy, you just saw men as something to aspire to, and they were everything from the way they dressed to the cars they drove to the games they played, card games, and you were seen and not heard back then. And once you got to the point in your life where you were kind of allowed to maybe join the poker game or card game, or maybe you were, allowed to drive the boat. I can drive the boat. Wow, that means I could be a man someday,
Interesting.
Coming of age.
Yeah, it's coming of age. Now, there's no age to come to for most at least here in California. Now, Michael and I kind of live in the same world, but Ben, you may live in a little bit different world. I know in the South it is much different. In the South, I would probably call Mr. Fieri, um, but in most places, maybe still, maybe, and that might be changing. I don't know, but there's nothing to aspire to. The men in our world, for the most part, are big children, and there's really no difference in the way they talk or the way they dress. Certainly not the way they dress, um, and what they engage in. I mean, I know so many men, uh, even my age, some, but that are still into. I was at a church small group meeting last week, and the prompt that the leader used, he said, if you had a podcast, this is what he said, if you had a weekly podcast where you had to speak about something for half an hour and you weren't prepared, what could you speak about? And I said, you've just described the last 10 years of my life. Okay. I always had a podcast, and half the time I wasn't prepared, but I could talk, so I just said whatever I could talk about. But two of the men who were in their 50s said Star Wars or Star Trek. That's what I could talk about because I'm still really into Star Wars. I'm like, grow up, man. But and I once did a podcast on baby boomer life and the things that have evolved in our society. And I think Star Wars was the trigger point, the catalyst is what I called it, my boomer catalyst. I think Star Wars was the catalyst of the infantilizing, if that's a word, of men. When that happened, that kind of changed things for men, where men didn't need to pass through a threshold of manhood. They didn't have to have that, that rite of passage to be a real man. You could stay a child. And I think that was coming in society, but I think that Star Wars and those kinds of things were kind of the trigger for that kind of set that in stone or set that in motion.
So. Interesting. That's really interesting. Michael, whenever you're ready.
Boy, you touched the third rail, man. Star Wars. Just kidding.
I know, man. I know. Now you're triggered. I'll clear down.
No.
But am I right? I mean, do you see that too? I mean,
Star Wars was a turning point for a lot of reasons, and I know what you're saying. It's the escapism and fantasy and living out vicariously through heroes on a screen or something like that, and contributing to and there's more to it than that. But yes, I'm not going to take issue with that at all. But for me, I didn't have. Okay, I did. I had two father figure role models that were opposite extremes, right? They were opposite extremes. There's the laissez-faire, lackadaisical, do what you want, no discipline father, and then there's the hyper, not physically abusive, but the walking on eggshells around the rage that could go off at any moment, right? So I had those two extremes. So I didn't have a normal, experience until I became a Christian, and then it was like I suddenly had a father, right? I'm like, oh, I spent time in the Word, and some people think of the Old Testament as God was different in the Old Testament, the judgment God, and then the New Testament is the mercy God. I'm like, no, God doesn't change. Look at Ananias and Sapphira; they're in the New Testament, and God killed them, right? So this concept of a father and that he's there and personal. I mean, I was just so healing for me. And so ideally, when I became a father, I was like, okay, now I'm going to learn by insight and I fail left and right. But let me just give a couple of examples just in the last couple of weeks of my son. And not that I'm taking any credit for it, but I'm so grateful to God. He's crossed some milestones, in a culture where everything is against you and the odds are against you to be masculine. He's had some real strides. I mean, he graduated from high school. That's one thing, right? That in and of itself is an accomplishment, right? Yeah. It's just like, I don't know if you can remember when you completed high school or college, it's this huge moment in your life that you couldn't have experienced unless you went through that. You can't explain to someone what that paradigm is when you complete this important phase of life. He finished high school, so I knew he was going through that. We also found a car, and so he had wrecked our car, right? And this was a kind of a failure on my part. If I let him have the family car, one of our cars, and he ended up just kind of owning it and not being responsible and wrecked it. And so that wrecking of the car was this reality check that turned out to be a good thing. I said, all right, now you got to save money. I'll do some matching funds with you. I'll help you. You've got to save money, and then you can buy a car when you find a car, right? So he finally saved up enough money, and they had this price range, and we went out. And this was last Saturday, just this past Saturday. We went. I'm like, all right, I'll go with you. Let's go find a car. He had found a few lots that had different specific cars that he wanted. He did the leg work. We showed up at this one lot, first one we went to, and the car he wanted had been sold the day before. And I was kind of relieved because it was above the price range. I'm like, you're already going beyond our price range. And then he said, well, can we just walk around the lot? And so we walk around the lot, and he spots this one car, and because he'd been doing his research or whatever, and he was like, oh, that looks nice. And I'm like, how much is that one to the guy? And he shouts back at the amount. And I'm like, wait, did I hear that right? It was like, 3/5 of the total price that we were shopping for. It was like coming in way under. I'm like, what's the mileage on it? Only 80,000 miles. So we take a test drive it. It's like, it's amazing. Had one owner, only 80,000 miles, and just like a perfect, seemed like too good to be true. And then we test drive it, we get back to the lot, and then he sees another car that's a step up, that's between the one that we found and the one that he wanted, and it's another couple thousand. And I gave him the decision. I'm like, all right, if you want that one, you have to pay the difference because you've saved enough for it. I'm happy with this other one you picked. And he weighed the difference. He's like, okay, I can get the nicer, sportier car, but it's going to cost me a little more, even though I have enough money. Or I can get this one that I just test drove and really like. And he made that decision. He made the right decision. He got the practical car, saving the money. And then something else happened. All these good things are happening in his life. And here I'm just watching as a father. Good things are happening. And I kind of said to him, like, oh, all this good stuff's happening. Something bad's going to happen soon. And sure enough, he drops his phone, crushes his phone. And he's had it for a couple of years. He just turns his phone into a brick. And it's an iPhone, latest whatever. And he goes out and upgrades, gets the new phone, pays it off himself. Doesn't go, Dad, can you blah, blah, blah. He's still on our plan and everything. And I'm like, oh my gosh, my son is taking responsibility. He's a man legally, 18, and he's graduated from high school. He has a car in his name now, and then on his own went out and paid for his whole new phone. So I think that's part of masculinity, taking responsibility, taking initiative, and so it was like I was more proud this past week and a half of seeing that my son is adapting to real life, becoming a man, and facing the things that are always going to be facing him. I'm like, okay, God, I did something right. I did something correct. What was the question again?
So you didn't answer it, but
No,
I will need to move on real quick just to help get to the point. So because Joel has to dip out in a few minutes. But thank you for sharing that, though. It's always really interesting hearing the perspectives of fathers. So I'm going to share my screen real quick. This is the main verse for today. So if either one of you can read this, actually, Joel, go ahead and read this for me, and then we'll dive into it.
Ephesians 6:4, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord.
It's very short, very to the point, but there are key words that are monumental that sadly so many people don't understand. The first part is pretty easy to grasp. Do not provoke your children to anger. Do not provoke. Don't poke the bear. Don't create a world that's built with anger. and resentment, but instead bring them up, raise them up. Okay.
Yes.
Is it through just giving them what they want? Is it raising them up through the gentle feminine side? No, it's raise them up in discipline and instruction. And this is the beauty of masculine and feminine. Okay. Here's how I've seen this. So stop sharing. Masculinity is what brings yourself and your family up that mountain, whatever that mountain is. It's the constant push to improve yourself or your family. To me, that's masculinity, the unrelenting refusal to keep going up that mountain, whatever that is. Femininity is what catches you after you're done for that small moment in time. The feminine side is what gives you the rest, the kindness, the gentleness that you need in order to endure the next mountain. That's the beautiful balance between the man and the woman. For the Christian connection, going back to that escape you were mentioning before, I completely understand, Joel, your view on, say, Star Wars, for example, being that catalyst to having men seek out that escape, that fantasy, to get away from the trials and the tribulations of the real world instead of going to the Word. The problem is, what's so sad in today's day and age, you do not have resources for men like you do for women when it comes to enduring the trials of this world. And even for Christian men and non-Christian men, if you look around and try to find resources for men, it's almost non-existent because the world has told men, you're a man, deal with it, suck it up. Just shut your mouth, keep being the breadwinner, keep making the money, keep dying in your jobs, keep killing yourselves, just make us money. That's how men have been treated. And so for so long, so many men have struggled trying to find some type of escape from climbing that mountain.
And actually, I'm going to interrupt you a second. That's because I got to go in a couple minutes, but that's being taken away too. The breadwinning part of it, that's beginning to be taken away too. Men are being told, it's coming close to the point where men are being told in our society, you're unnecessary, period. Go back to your video games and just escape into your world. We don't need you at all, even for the money, which is happening. I see it happening. So, and like I said, I've raised a son and a daughter, help raise a stepson and a stepdaughter, and the messages sent to both of them are completely different.
Right.
Our daughter is the world is wide open for her. She's got all kinds of ambitions, and you go, girl. And our son is just like, oh, well, you're here too. Okay, well, just do whatever you want, but stay out of our way, and we really don't need you. If we need to make a baby or something, maybe figure that out somehow. But otherwise, just go away. There's really nothing in society. The future is female. All this kind of stuff, right? Which is, speaking of Star Wars, Michael, I'm sure keep in touch with the Star Wars world, how upset Star Wars fans are because of how female and other things it's turning, right? So there's not even room in Star Wars anymore for men. Am I right? So anyway, but that's the challenge is going to be for the churches and any society, but especially the church. What are you going to do with your men, especially your young men? The only hope young men have now is going to be Christian men or men who can step away and overcome society's desire to just have men be disposable. How are we as a church? One of my friends is named Dave Murrow. He wrote a book, Why Men Hate Going to Church, and his ministry is calling the church, not calling men back to church, but calling the church back to men. How are we going to reach men? And again, I think it starts in the home with good fathers who will have Michael's vision of masculinity. Hey, take responsibility, step up. And the key word is up. Men are
I
being pushed
honestly,
down. How are we going to bring them up?
yeah, I honestly would love to continue this topic in multiple episodes. If that's cool with y'all, because this is such a very deep topic that like I'm hearing all this and I want to go down different branches.
Right.
But if that's cool with you, I'm down for it because this could just be the first episode of it because masculinity is such a deep, very emotional topic for so many guys.
Yeah.
And
Okay. Yeah. Let me know. Guys, I do have to go. Everybody in the
Yeah.
chat. Thank you. Sorry to cut out early. Next time.
Now we'll pick up here when you come back. I like this topic for sure.
yeah, no, this
All right.
this is so good.
Take care, guys.
And Patriots, let's go and keep listening to Michael real quick. Got a few minutes left. I want to share my screen one more time here. What Joel just said really can help us encapsulate all of this. So he was saying, we need to bring masculinity back to the forefront. We need to encourage men to be men again. What does that mean? What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be masculine? Well, really, it's summarized here. If you're not a father, you can still apply this to yourself, and that's the word discipline.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. One word, discipline. What is it to be a man? A real man is to be disciplined. So, in your experience, Michael, why is it so hard to find men who are truly disciplined in today's day and age?
Well, a couple things. There is a war against men. Like feminism is satanic, right? It's saying you don't need men, right? It's literally contrary to God's design. And so, but we have, Satan's trying to destroy everything that God does. And so this phrase patriarchy is now demonized. It's the patriarchy is evil because it's the reason for all the evils in the world, because men this and men that and men this and men that. And men have been in charge all this time and see how much evil is in the world. That's because of men, patriarchy. And that's like kindergarten reasoning. That's like literally kindergarten reasoning. It's like, wait a minute. You could point all the things where men are responsible for this, but also men are die at work exponentially more than women because they do the riskier, harder jobs, right? So the discipline part, and getting back to my analogy with my son, right? So discipline is something, we just innately know certain things. And for my son, to get a car, something he valued highly, right? I gave him that experience. As soon as he was old enough and got his driver's license, I let him drive the car. And it was a bit of a mistake to just let him without putting parameters, right? Without putting discipline structure in. And so he kind of owned it. It was his space, and he could do whatever he wanted, blah, blah, blah. But then when he wrecked it, it was a resetting of those parameters. I'm like, okay, it was a good coming from a bad, right? Good coming out of this bad situation. He recognized something called delayed gratification, right? Delayed gratification. And that is something that is completely ignored and forgotten in this hedonistic society. Instant gratification is all that matters, right? It's all that matters. Get what I want now. And if I'm prevented from getting it, it's some oppressor, right? If I'm not getting what I want right now, I'm being oppressed. That's literally, again, a kindergarten mentality. People not thinking beyond their nose and the front of their face. So to recognize there's something of great value ahead in the distance that I must discipline myself to achieve or to reach. And that's my son having a job, right? He knows, I'm going to work. I may hate it while I'm there, or it may be annoying, but I know that each minute I am here, I am paying into my future something that I want, right? That's discipline. And a father's supposed to put those parameters in so that the child can recognize that. It's not that you teach them or create that in them. It's already in them. You just have to guide them and put the parameters in to help them see it.
Yeah, it's the old school mentality of being a man, being tough, enduring pain, that has a lot of value. But I think what really matters from that, it's not just to endure the struggle just because you're a man and you endure the struggle. No, it's to go through the struggle because it builds discipline, because it sows that seed for that future challenge that you need to endure, that no one's going to be there to help you except your Lord. And if you're not a Christian, then it is just you. And it doesn't help that we live in a society that, like you said, is very anti-man. I mean, I watched a documentary years ago, back in 2018. It's called The Red Pill. And it was made by a woman, and she was a self-proclaimed feminist.
I remember this
But
story.
she made this documentary over the men's rights movement. And she made it clear, she was like, just to be clear, I don't agree with everything that they do. But at the end of the documentary, she was like, I had no idea it was this bad for men.
Yeah.
I had no idea
Yeah.
that the rate for suicide is higher in men. There are more men who die in workplace accidents. There are more men who lose their kids for horrible reasons just because they're a man. It's easier for a woman to get a job. It's easier for women to get their kids. It's easier for women to get an increased salary. There's so many things that she realized, oh my gosh, this is horrible. And the thing that stood out to me the most, I don't know how much it is now, but back then, guess how many shelters there were for men who were abused and assaulted?
0.
There was 1.
Yeah.
And it was in Arkansas. Of all places, Arkansas. I don't know how many there are now. This is back in 2018. But, of course, there are millions for women. Now, to be clear, I want to make this very clear. Women are amazing. I'm not an anti-woman person. You need to have that feminine side. And we can definitely do another video over that in a future episode. But you have to have both. The problem is when one overtakes the other. You have to have both. And the beauty of this scripture is that this scripture creates that perfect balance.
Yeah. God created certain institutions, right? There are institutions that are man-made, right? Like, there's, the Masonic Lodge, right? Or a poker club or whatever, right? There's institutions that humans create, but God created 4 institutions. Well, 4 governments: self-government, family government. The institution of the family is God designed, right? That's father as the head, right? That's patriarchy. It's a design. It's implicit. It's within humanity. God designed. So to demonize something that God designed is satanic, right? To think patriarchy, evil, is Satan winning, right? Winning over a cross section of the culture, right? And the other 2 institutions that God created are the church and civil government, right? So those are 4 institutions that God created, and to attack them. Well, before we're out of time, I want to mention Jesse Lee Peterson. You know who that is? He's one of my favorite guys. A guy named Jesse Lee Peterson.
That's familiar.
He's has a radio talk show, and then he has YouTube channels. And I just yesterday watched a video of the title is "Whack Dating Coach Destroyed by Jesse." So he's this black guy, and he's very very straightforward. Amazing. He says that a lot. Amazing. And he's talking to this woman dating coach, and she's been married and divorced twice and proposed to a total of 9 times. And he's saying, well, men and women are different. And part of the problem is that, in our culture, people think that men are just playing a role, the role of the man, or the role of the leader, or the role of the head. And men are not playing a role. They don't see it as a role. They just are, right? Men just are a certain way. And as Joel was talking about Star Wars, they put some of the newest Star Wars, like they put a woman and make her masculine and think that's somehow feminine, feminism, right? They take a woman character and put all these masculine traits on her. It's like, wait, you're swapping out something natural that we know that men do naturally, and a woman starts playing that role. Sorry, we're out of time. We went over.
Well, and what's even worse is it's vice versa now too.
Yeah.
So we can dive more deep into this because we're definitely going to
Yes.
do that. We're going to dive deeper into
Scratching the
it.
surface. Good.
Yep.
Good topic.
Thank you so much for joining us, guys. I really appreciate it. Time always flies by. Michael, can you send us off, please?
Love you all. Just grateful that you're all here. And remember, as I always say, God is in control.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. All right, Patriots, have a wonderful day. See y'all next Friday. Signing out.